This photograph is a photograph of our baby brother taken about 1949, 1950. So that it's one of the only photographs of an individual child of our family. Usually we were all together as siblings. And I'm quite sure that he was there at that same day that there was a photograph taken of the four siblings together, and then this was an individual one for our family. This would be sent back to China, and our mother had one of those. There was only one of them, as far as I know. So it's really something that's when he had long hair, and we have a photograph of him shortly after this where his hair was cut. So we all had long hair like that as children until we went to kindergarten, and then our hair was cut. But this is a real neat photo. I like the vase. He's standing. It's hard to picture him standing still long enough to have a very clear photograph without moving just a little bit. He did a really good job.
So here we have a ceramic piece that he used. You will see it in some of the photos. One with Larry Grant's brother, Howard Grant.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Yes, that is the piece there.
Oh wow.
So we're hoping Howard will come and touch it again. So
Wow.
that's.
And how did you recover that?
One of the siblings had it.
Oh okay.
Yes, I just found out that 2 days ago that she had it. So one of the interesting things about this photo, 518 Main, was his main studio for about 20 years. This is where he actually died, was at this studio. And you'll notice there's a sign underneath the number that says Chinese photographer. So right away we would know, we'd be able to date this as roughly at the time of the war when Japanese businesses became sort of, off limits. And he would have wanted to identify himself as, I'm Chinese, I'm okay, we're not the enemy.
Yeah.
And so he had that hanging there. And then this, Yucho Chow loved radios. You see a big radio in the photo here, and so this is the radio from their house. Yeah. And then just here are these wonderful photos. And so what we tried to do was, the first part of the hidden story was the hidden story of Yucho Chow himself. He had sort of been lost to time, and how his work was lost. So that was the first layer. And the second layer was this hidden story of Chinatown. These were the visual evidence that Chinatown was for more than Chinese. Mm-hmm. And here it is, these are the people. And then the third thing is every time somebody gave me a photo, I would ask them, what can you tell me about these people? Sometimes they didn't know, sometimes they'd say, I gotta ask my old aunt. Mm-hmm. But in that way, all these photos, which would have otherwise been silent, suddenly here we were telling their story too, right? So kind of 3 layers of pulling off the hidden aspect of it. Having said that, this is one of my favorites, and it's unidentified. We don't know who this couple is. But I've always been enamored by his face and how he glows, and he seems so happy. They didn't have a lot of money. This was a wedding photo, but after the war, people didn't have a lot of money. So you'll see a lot of the photos are just dressed in regular civilian outfits, no big gown and tuxedo. So they would have had to save their money to take this photo, and he would have probably got out and had a new suit tailored. But I'm so impressed by just how, look at that scene, that's pressed, and his shoulders are back, and he's just so. And it reminds me how for people, their weddings, everybody had that kind of same kind of sense of celebration and joy. And I made them the biggest because I just loved his face. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is some early photos. This is probably taken in the late 1918s or 20s. So this particular background Yucho Chow used. early example of, so he was one of the first to hand paint. And he started very carefully, just doing little dabs on flowers. But what's also interesting is he has superimposed this woman. There are two identical photos like this in UBC. The only difference is this woman, which likely means she was far away, she couldn't come to the wedding, but it was important that she be in the family photo.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's a few where people have been superimposed.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and he did a good job, pre-Photoshop days, right?
How did you know?
Because I saw the two photos together, and I just noticed the detail.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah, they look like identical, but I could see the difference was her. Yeah.
The original Photoshop.
Yes, and he was good. He was really good. Yeah. So, and then we moved through, like, Hoi Ping, you'll recognize that. Yeah. Through different associations. This is also an interesting one. This is one of our silent photos again that's lost its voice. We found this. I actually bought this on eBay.
Oh, wow.
So some of Yucho Chow's work has ended up in eBay and thrift stores, value villages, stuff like that. I bought this, and there was some handwriting on the back. It was a postcard, so people would make postcards, and it says, Mother, I suppose you'll remember this face. So obviously this woman is referring to somebody, but we don't know who these people are anymore. So we thought, they're policemen. I thought, they're police cadets for sure. And then we contacted the museum, police museum, and they said, no, those are not police cadets. And they're not transit conductors. And anyway, so we're hoping, we have no idea what they are, and that's an interesting badge. We thought maybe railroad workers or conductors, but obviously, again, really proud, standing really straight. And the other interesting thing I find is how many people would print postcards, and they would print multiples, and they would give them out, and you'd see a lot of handwriting on these things, a lot of handwriting on photos generally. And I was saying to somebody, we often think that Facebook and Instagram, this idea of sharing ourselves, is current, but back in these days, people did that a lot too. They were giving photos out to all their friends, and it's not so, the desire to kind of share oneself is not so new. Yeah, there's different children. That's the one that you saw already. That's Howard. So there's an interesting story to this one here. So this is a Sikh family called the Baines family. And many years later, this little boy told a story. So when he was in his teens, he and his uncle went to see a movie around here. And they wouldn't let him the uncle come into the movie theater because of his turban. And he says, no one's going to be able to see over you. We refuse to sell you a ticket. And so he was now, as I said, a teenager or whatever. He said, well, listen, we'll buy the last seat in the theater, right? So we'll sit at the real back, and then we won't be able to, the turbans won't disturb. So they sat down, and within a few minutes, two women sat in front of them with those great big hats that they had back in those days and completely blocked their view. So he called the theater manager over and said, come here, I want to show you something. Sit here and see if you can see. You never blocked these white women from coming in with their hats. And from then on, they blocked them from coming in again. This is, do you know Wally Opal?
That's his family?
That's Wally Opal there. Wally Opal was he was a lawyer, judge, but he was also the Attorney General for British Columbia under Gordon Campbell.
Yeah.
Gordon Campbell's?
That's
yeah.
right.
So this is interesting, Sikh family, and within a year, this photo, his father dies, leaving his mother, who doesn't speak English, doesn't read or write, on her own, with these two sons in this foreign country. And she winds up working as a housekeeper, and then she buys a cow, and she milks it and sells the milk every day, like just poverty level they were living at.
They were on the island, right?
Yeah, and yet somehow, she managed to make, this wonderful son, right, who was so accomplished. And
Who provided you the photograph?
I found it. He didn't, I actually showed it to Wally Open. He says, I don't remember this photo. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
But I knew it was a Yucho Chow because of that background, that big Art Deco, right? So this is another mixed race family here. And this is in the early 40s, right? When she was a woman from England. She lost her husband to the First World War. So she was stuck here in Canada. And she fell in love with a Jamaican Canadian, black Jamaican. But he had been here since 1885 or something. He came really early. But at that time, like in 1910, that was so unusual to have a mixed race couple. But they knew that Yucho Chow, it was a place they could take their photos. There'd be no questions asked, right? No sense of discrimination. So that's what's so beautiful about the story. It's acceptance, right?
This photograph is the first family photograph that we have of our family together. This is my older brother, Gordon. This is myself. We've got a young sister, Helen. And that's our mother, Agnes. And that's our dad, Hong Kim Ming. This was taken before Howard was born. So Howard was born 5 years after this one was taken. That photograph that we just left there. So this is the second photograph. Then we have another photograph of 1, 2, 3, 4 of us together. But it's all taken at roughly 1940. The one that Howard probably taken in 1949. So this is a photograph that was sent back to China. So it's one of those funny little things that as a little boy I got new rubber boots. So they said, we're going to take a picture today, put your shoes on. I said, no, I want to put those new shiny rubber boots on. So I'm wearing rubber boots in this photograph, and it was one of those things that was a brand new pair of shoes that I just got as a child. So that was what I wanted to wear, and I was allowed to wear that. So this was a really interesting day for me. When I try and think back on it, it was really, really a good time. And it's something, so many, many men wore suits back in that era. So this is a film that's in the documentary, All Our Father's Relations. But that's before Howard was born.
So this is one of the oldest pictures in our collection. We think it was maybe 1914, 1915, just based on the kind of clothing they have. And as you probably know, back in these days, props had meaning. So there was always, the photographer would have props. And in fact, Yucho Chow had a box where he would have a little pocket watch and jewelry and earrings and fountain pen. So every prop has meaning. And for some reason in this photo, it's very strange because we have a table in front of the people, so they're kind of being blocked. We have these glasses that look like water or something clear in a bottle. And we have this newspaper half hanging out of the table. And this woman is staring at that woman. And we think, what was the meaning of all this? Like, what was going on in this particular photo? And his hair, like, I remembered this photo. I saw that a few years ago, but I remembered his hair. I said, where's the guy with the hair? So it's a very interesting mystery. Like, what do these things mean? So this photo, this was taken in Vancouver.
Oh.
This was taken in China.
Oh.
And because she would have been stuck in China, right? Because of the head tax. So she sent him this photo, and then early Photoshop, Yucho Chow cut her in, but you can tell because of the feet, right? The shadows aren't the same. So, but even though they were apart, they were united in the photo, which is really beautiful, I think.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So what's interesting, this is later again. This is, again, in the later 40s. I love that we can see inside his studio here, and you can see this lot of clutter and lots of things going on. Interesting, he's got all these different logos going on at the same time. So he has like this logo, and he's got that famous seal logo, and then he's got this logo, and he's got some other logos. You're going to see, obviously a very creative person, somebody who just constantly reinventing. But I also find it interesting that there's so many white people in this. You know, that person's white, that person's white, white, white. Where are all these people? And I don't know if you would not recognize this person. So back in the early 40s, there was an American actor named Roy Rogers. He was sort of this wholesome cowboy and famous. Anyway, that's a photo of him. And interestingly, Roy Rogers always wore a white cap because that was the good guy. But in this photo, he's got a dark hat on, and we don't know why.
Catherine Clement. Catherine?
I was just thinking if Yucho Chow was alive right now, he would be so moved to see this number of people in this room. There's sometimes in the course of our lives, there are people who have a profound impact on us, who change who we are fundamentally. And in my case, one of them was a man I had never met. He was not related to me. He never took a photograph of anyone in my family, as far as I know. And yet, he became my obsession over the last number of years. And I first encountered his work when I was interviewing World War II veterans. And it was quite innocent. They would bring out their albums. I would see a photo in a studio with a beautiful little seal and an interesting name, Yucho Chow. And then I would see another one, and another one, and another one. And eventually I started to pull on that thread, which was Yucho Chow. And I learned that he was the first Chinese photographer in Vancouver. I learned that he photographed during a very tumultuous and transformative time in our city's history. He paid the head tax. His business survived the 1907 race riots that were here. He photographed during the First World War. He photographed during the Exclusion Act when the community basically was cut off. He photographed during the long, lean years of the Great Depression, and he survived. He photographed during the Second World War when we sent our men back in for another world conflict. And luckily for him, he survived to see the winning of full citizenship and voting rights for Chinese Canadians. So I knew his story from the Chinese perspective. And then one day, through a whole series of circumstances, I found an email from a woman named Judith Maxey, who said to me, "Oh, you forgot something." He was the photographer for the early Black Canadian community that was here too. And I knew that he had photographed other people, but this was my first visual evidence of that. And so I pulled on that string and it became more colorful and more complex. And then I was talking to somebody from the Sikh Canadian community. And he said, "Remember, Catherine, in those days, for the early Sikh Canadians, not a single white barber would cut our hair. We couldn't get a tailor to make us a suit, and no white photographer would take our photos. So we came down to Chinatown, and we went to Yucho Chow. And he welcomed us into his studio, and we in turn welcomed him into our world. He became our chronicler for our community in those early days, and even managed to get it to take photos in their temples. And then someone else told me about the Ukrainian community, something I didn't know. And he said to me, we were white, yes, but we were considered bottom of the barrel. And people made fun of us and made fun of our names. And we weren't, we were really low down there to the rest of society. And he took their photos too, and Polish Canadians. And it goes on and on and on, and First Nations community. And so what became a thread became this really complex tapestry. And it all linked back to this one man. And unfortunately, when he was working, it was just a business, really. He was, running a studio, was trying to feed his family. And unfortunately, his work was lost. And so this exhibition, as many of you know, has been me over the last 8 years. I'm a bit obsessive compulsive, which is probably the personality you need to do this. And one photo at a time, one family at a time, one conversation at a time. And for me, it's been an interesting journey too, because I have met so many other people in so many other communities and heard so many fantastic stories. Every time someone gave me a photo, I wanted to know the hidden story in that photo too. And so it all began to create this, as I said, a beautiful, beautiful tapestry about our community and about early Chinatown and about this lost story about Chinatown and how it was a place for many different communities to come and feel safe and welcome and part of, comfortable. I want to just say a few words about the exhibition itself. So what you see here is roughly 80 photos. There's probably about 250, close to 300 now that we actually have. Most of these focus on Yucho Chow, the work himself, the work of the patriarch, because he was the one that actually started this all and went through this very interesting period of time. We have tried to, in some ways, this was really challenging to put together. It was very stressful, actually, because usually photos galleries are very much something the same, all in black frames, all lined up. But we were inspired by the photos you might see on the other side, which was Yucho Chow's studio. It was very kind of higgledy-piggledy, and very dense with photos. And we decided we would try, without being too chaotic, try to mimic some of that feel of a lot of busyness, a lot of things, a lot of stories. And we also made another decision that we thought was very important because Yucho Chow would have wanted this. We decided to mix all the photos in together. So rather than having a section for the Chinese and a section for the Sikh Canadian community, we wanted them to be together. And the reason for that was because we wanted to show the commonality between these different communities. We may have had different skin colors. We may have spoke different languages. We may have come from the four corners of the earth. We may have been wealthy or not wealthy. But underneath it all, we are fundamentally the same. And these photos, which show someone so proud, wearing a really good suit, paying this money to have a photo taken, wanting to have their children with them, wanting to have their grandparents. All of these were something that we all shared in common, was the idea that we wanted to memorialize those important moments in our lives. We wanted to be remembered. We wanted to share. And so that's why all of these are mixed together, is to remind us how similar we are. And in a day and age when so much of that tension is arising, the white people don't want to have the dark people or the brown people come in, it reminds us this exhibit reminds us how much we have in common and always did and always will. So I want to thank a few people. I need to thank a few people. I feel like this speech is going on, but I need to say a few things. I first of all want to thank Terry. You've already mentioned her, but Terry Mew, who's one of our other directors. When you get Terry to help you, you get her husband, you get her brother-in-law, you get her mother, you get everybody involved. And so she was very helpful to me. Also, Donna Wu, who's the one who's set up a lot of the food that we hope you will enjoy afterwards. The little team that worked with me was wonderful. We had June Chow, who does a lot of work here in Chinatown, Susan Ma, Leland Wong, our young UBC student who worked with me on the Yucho Chow section, and we have Henry Yu to thank for that. My very old friend Faye Roth, who got a crash course in Chinatown history, and my partner Peter, who has put up with the 8 years of having to listen to this story. Everyone I found, he had to be patient. But more than that, Peter is a combination of engineer and artist, and so he was so helpful in helping me think through and actually put this installation together, so I owe him a lot. I also want to thank Judith Maxey for just some of the emails she shared with me, and this back and forth relationship we've had has really been part of this, my own transformation, and this recognize that this is a story, many hidden stories, but a story of tolerance. And lastly, I want to thank the Chow grandchildren. We have a few of them here today. Leonard Chow, you want to put up your hand? Oh. Carol Anthony. Carol's mother was the hand colorist. Anna Chow, who's the oldest granddaughter, I believe. Yes. Jerome Chow. He's back there somewhere. Yeah. And I especially want to give a special thank you. Oh, sorry. Susan. Oh, Susan Chow. Oh, and okay, sorry. Oh, David. Oh, goodness. David Chow. Yeah. Chan. Okay. And I want to give a special thank you to Ben Chow, who acted as my assistant through, I can't believe how patient he was and all the calls I made. Can you find this? Where's this? Where's that? So Ben Chow. Yeah. And I would love to thank all of you for coming. As I said, this has been an 8-year labor of love. So many hidden stories. It starts off with the hidden story Yucho Chow, the hidden story of Chinatown, the hidden story of these people. But it also, as I said, is just a story about tolerance, a story about community, and about the similarities between us all. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
Chinatown, the streetlights smell of cheap perfume. Chinatown. Chinatown, your streets, rock a lion's beat. You rock the smile like a lantern on a winter's eve. Chasing down the sweet smell of memories. Chinatown, your gates never close on me. Chinatown never lets me down. It always feels like home. You're there for me whenever I'm feeling all alone. Whenever I feel my world is spinning round, I always go to Chinatown. Chinatown.
No, I think they're sitting down. They're sitting down. She's had a bunch of photos that didn't make the cut. Because I knew when I was accepted.
Who did the framing?
I did.
You did?
Well, Peter, I bought all the frames, and Peter, but they were all like $5, $10 at
But
Value
it was like
Village.
a billion-step process where you were like matching the
Yes,
size and orientation of
Yes.
the photo scan with a digital frame, and then matching it with the orientation
Yeah.
of the physical frame.
yes, that was the hard
So
part.
somebody was asking me, are these frames original? And I'm like, nothing's original. Everything had to be recreated.
Yeah, so most of these pictures had no mat around them. But when Yucho Chow would have presented his photos, he always presented them with a mat. And without a mat, those photos do not look the same in a frame. So for each one, I found all these vintage mats that were already on other things I had scanned. And then I put them in, and then I had to readjust every size. It was a bloody lots of work.
It looks great.
Yeah, thank you.
It looks pretty incredible.